The anomaly did not appear on sensors. That was the first problem. Commander Alien Rowe checked the array twice, then a third time, not because he expected a different result, but because the alternative, that something could exist in monitored space without being detected, was not a possibility he was prepared to accept. The system was functioning perfectly. Every diagnostic returned green. Every calibration matched baseline. There was nothing wrong with the sensors, which meant Alien leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the empty display. There was something wrong with reality. "Run a passive sweep," he said quietly. His voice carried across the bridge in a way that made people listen without understanding why. Lieutenant Sarah didn't respond immediately. She was already doing it. Her hands moved across the console with controlled precision, executing a scan that did not rely on emission, only on what space itself was willing to reveal. 3 seconds passed. Then she stopped. Not because the scan had finished, because it had returned something she didn't know how to say. "Report," Alien said. Sarah swallowed once. "Sir, there's a mass reading." Alien didn't look away from the screen. "Then why isn't it displaying?" The pause. Because now the problem had 2 parts. And the second part was worse. "It is displaying," she said. Another pause. "Sir, it's just not visible." That got his attention. Alien turned his head slightly. "Not fully. Just enough. Clarify." Sarah tapped once on her console. A data stream appeared on the secondary display. Numbers, clean and precise, exactly what you would expect from a confirmed object. Distance, velocity, mass, all present, all consistent, all real. But the primary display, the one that rendered objects into space, showed nothing. Empty. Perfectly empty. Alien stood slowly. Range, 3.8 million kilometers. Vector, direct inbound. No deviation. Velocity. Sarah hesitated. That was new. "Lieutenant." "It's steady, sir." "That's not what I asked." "I know." She turned just slightly. Enough for him to see her expression. "Controlled. Careful. Wrong. It's steady at 0.3 light speed." Silence settled over the bridge. Not sudden. Not sharp. But the kind that builds quietly as understanding moves from one mind to another. Alien didn't react immediately, because reacting would mean accepting the number. And the number was not acceptable. "Confirm." "I already have." "Do it again." She did. Same result. Of course it was. Alien exhaled slowly. At 0.3 light speed, a mass that size should. He stopped the thought. Because he already knew what it should do. It should tear space behind it. It should generate a thermal signature visible across systems. It should announce itself to the universe in every measurable way. Did none of that. No heat. No wake. No radiation. No distortion. Nothing. A mass moving at relativistic velocity, without interacting with reality. That was not a sensor problem. That was not a classification error. That was... Alien looked back at the empty display. For a moment, he had the distinct and deeply unwelcome feeling that the display was not failing to show something, but that something had chosen not to be shown. He dismissed the thought immediately, because thoughts like that were not useful. "Open wide-spectrum scan," he said. Sarah didn't move. "Lieutenant." "It's already open, sir." Of course it was. Alien nodded once. Behind him, someone shifted in their seat. A small sound. But in the silence, it felt loud. "How long has it been there?" he asked. Sarah checked. Her fingers slowed, then stopped. "It hasn't moved, sir." Alien frowned. "You just said it was inbound." "It is." "Then what do you mean it hasn't moved?" Sarah turned fully this time. There was no way to soften it. No change in position over the last 12 minutes. The words settled heavily, because they didn't make sense. An object traveling at 0.3 light speed would not remain stationary, not even for a second. Alien stepped closer to the console. "Run a temporal check." Sarah did. The system processed. For a fraction of a second. Long enough to notice. Then it returned the result. She stared at it. Sir. Elian didn't ask. He already knew that tone. The timestamp is inconsistent. In what way? It says the object arrived. She stopped. Because the sentence refused to finish cleanly. Elian. She rarely used his name. That got his full attention. It says the object arrived 6 hours ago. Silence. And? It also says it hasn't arrived yet. Commander Elian Rowe had spent 14 years on the fringe. 6 of those years as captain. Long enough to know what normal looked like. Normal was predictable. Normal was empty space punctuated by debris fields, cold asteroids, and the occasional ghost signal from something that had stopped existing long before it stopped transmitting. Normal followed rules. Strict ones. Rules that every officer on this bridge had memorized, trusted, and built their entire training around. Mass required energy. Motion required interaction. Nothing moved at relativistic speed without announcing itself to everything within range. Those were not guidelines. They were constants. Elian turned his attention back to the console. Full system cross-check, he said. This time, multiple hands moved. Not because the order required it, but because no one on the bridge trusted a single point of verification anymore. Navigation reran vector calculations. Engineering checked for internal interference. Sensors recalibrated against background radiation. Every system reached outward, then inward, searching for a mistake. There had to be one. There was always one. Lieutenant Sarah spoke first. Sensor array is clean. No drift, no lag, no signal distortion. Navigation confirms vector, another voice added. If the object is real, it's on a direct approach path. Engineering followed. No internal anomalies. Power system stable. No feedback loops. Elian listened. Not to the words, but to what wasn't being said. No hesitation. No uncertainty in the data. Only in what the data meant. He stepped toward the central display again. Still empty. Perfectly, impossibly empty. Run external verification, he said. Sarah blinked once. You mean? Yes. That got attention. External verification wasn't standard procedure. It meant asking another ship to confirm your readings. It meant admitting, even if only quietly, that you might be wrong. Sarah opened a narrowband channel. Fringe Patrol Vessel Ardent, this is Command Vessel Halcyon. Requesting passive confirmation on unidentified mass at coordinates. She transmitted the data. They waited. 7 seconds. 8. 9. The reply came back clean. Too clean. Halcyon, this is Ardent. Confirming no objects at provided coordinates. Your space is clear. Silence. Sarah didn't respond immediately. Elian didn't tell her to. Because the moment had already shifted. The bridge was no longer operating inside shared reality. 2 ships. Same coordinates. Same space. 2 completely different truths. Run it again, Elian said. Sarah did. Same response. No objects detected. Elian nodded once. Close the channel. She hesitated. Sir, if we close it. She did. The silence that followed was different now. Heavier. Because now it wasn't just impossible. It was isolated. Elian turned slowly, looking across his crew. These systems, he said calmly, have been verified independently across 3 fleets, 2 civilizations, and 40 years of continuous operation. No one spoke. They knew this. But they needed to hear it. We do not have a sensor error. The pause. We have a disagreement. That landed. Because disagreements had implications. System disagreements meant one of 2 things. Either their reality was wrong, or someone else's was. Elian returned to the console. Magnify the data stream. Sarah expanded the raw feed. Numbers filled the display. Precise. Stable. Unquestionably real. Distance holding steady. Velocity constant. Mass consistent with something large. Very large. Larger than anything that should move the way it was moving. Elian studied the numbers. He trusted numbers. Numbers didn't lie. People misinterpreted them. Machines misread them. But numbers themselves, were honest. And these numbers were saying something very simple. Something very clear. Something completely unacceptable. There is an object, he said quietly. Behind him, no one argued. Because the data was right there. And it is moving toward us. Another pause. And it does not exist. No one corrected him. Because there was no correction to make. Lieutenant Sarah shifted slightly. Sir, the permission to ask a question. Elian didn't look away from the display. Granted. What do we classify it as? That was the question. Not what it was. Not what it meant. But where it fit. Every object had a category. Every anomaly had a designation. That was how the system worked. Elian stared at the empty space where the object should have been. For a long moment, longer than command protocol usually allowed. He said nothing. Because classification required understanding. And understanding required rules. Finally he spoke. We don't. The pause. Then more quietly. Not yet. Behind him, someone exhaled. So, unsteady. Because that answer carried more weight than anything else he could have said. Whatever this was, had not happened before. Elian straightened slightly. His voice returned to command tone. Controlled. Measured. Maintain observation. No active scans. No transmissions. Sarah frowned. Sir, protocol requires. I am aware of protocol. Turn now. Fully. For the moment, protocol assumes we are dealing with something that follows known rules. The beat. This does not. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't fear. Not yet. It was something else. Something sharper. Anticipation. Elian looked back at the empty display. At the place where nothing was, and something was, at the same time. Let's not introduce ourselves, he said quietly, until we understand what we're introducing ourselves to. The object changed position. That wasn't correct. Elian watched the numbers update in real time. Distance, unchanged. Velocity, unchanged. Vector, unchanged. And yet, zoom, he said. Sarah magnified the data grid. The empty display remained empty. But the coordinates shifted. Not smoothly. Not along a path. They jumped. One moment, 3.8 million kilometers. The next, 3.6. Then back to 3.8. 3.9. No transition. No travel time. Presence. Absence. Presence again. Like something deciding where it was. The bridge stayed quiet. Because no one wanted to say it first. Elian did. That's not movement. Sarah shook her head slowly. No, sir. Then what is it? She hesitated. Because the answer was worse. It's selection. That word sat in the air. Wrong. Deeply wrong. Elian leaned closer. Explain. Sarah pulled up the raw positional logs. Each update isn't tracking displacement, she said carefully. It's logging a new confirmed position without recording how it got there. Elian processed that. So the system isn't seeing it move. No, sir. It's seeing it exist in different places. Sarah nodded once. Yes. Silence again. Because that wasn't a sensor limitation. That was a violation. Elian's mind moved quickly now. Check for signal delay. Already did. No lag. Gravitational distortion? None detected. Quantum fluctuation? Sarah paused. Not at any level we can measure. Elian straightened slightly. Then asked the question no one wanted to ask. Is it one object? That took longer. Because now they weren't testing the system. They were testing reality itself. Sarah rerouted the scan. Deep scan. Layered analysis. Multiple spectrums. The system processed. For longer this time. Half a second. An eternity. Result. She stared at it. Sir. Elian didn't look at her. What does it say? Sarah didn't answer immediately. Because reading it once had not been enough. She read it again. Same result. It says, yes. Relief flickered briefly across the bridge. Then vanished. Because she hadn't finished. It also says, no. Elian turned slowly. Clarify. Sarah swallowed. The system identifies a single mass signature, but it's resolving across multiple positional states simultaneously. The pause. As if it's one object, occupying several locations, one at a time, without moving between them. Elian held her gaze. Is that possible? Sarah didn't answer, because the system already had no classification available. Of course. Elian looked back at the display. Still empty. Still perfectly, impossibly empty. Thermal scan. Running. A moment. Negative. No heat signature. That's not possible. I know. At that velocity, friction alone should. I know. He stopped. Because repeating the rules wasn't helping. Energy output. None detected. Residual radiation? 0. Elian exhaled slowly. A mass that size, moving at that speed. He didn't finish. Because they all knew. It should be screaming. To every sensor. Every instrument. Every part of space around it. Instead, nothing. Like it wasn't interacting with reality at all. Like reality was optional. Run gravitational scan, he said. Sarah complied. There was a result. A small one, but real. Minimal distortion detected, she said. Elian nodded. Good. That's something. But Sarah didn't relax. Sir? What? It's not behind the object. Elian frowned. Where is it? Sarah turned the display. The distortion appeared, ahead of the object. Silence. Because now, they had something worse than absence. They had reversal. Elian stepped closer. Confirm. Sarah did. Same result. Gravitational pull is forming, in front of its projected path. Elian stared at it. That wasn't just wrong. That was backwards. Mass dragged space behind it. Boys. Without exception. Cause-effect. Not the other way around. But this was effect before cause. Like space knew where the object would be. Before the object got there. Elian felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. Not of what this was, but of what it wasn't. It wasn't following rules. It wasn't breaking rules. It was operating outside them. Sir, Sarah said quietly. He didn't look at her. What? There's something else. Of course there was. There always is, he muttered. Go ahead. She hesitated. Because this one felt different. The timestamps. Elian closed his eyes briefly. Still inconsistent? No. The pause. Worse. He opened his eyes. How? Sarah turned the display toward him. He read it. Then again. Then a third time. Because the meaning didn't settle the first two. The system is logging future data. The words barely registered. Elaborate. The positional shifts. She pointed. They're being recorded before they happen. Elian stared. That's not possible. I know. Then explain it. I can't. Of course she couldn't. Because explanation required sequence. And sequence had just failed. Elian looked back at the empty display. At the place where something was, and wasn't, and had already been, and hadn't yet arrived. For the first time since this began, he allowed himself to think something he had been avoiding. Not say it. Just think it. This isn't an object. The thought lingered. Unwelcome. Unstable. He pushed it aside. Because conclusions required evidence. And they didn't have enough. Not yet. Maintain observation, he said quietly. His voice was steady. Because it had to be. Even if nothing else was. Log everything. Sarah nodded. Already doing it. Elian watched the data stream. Numbers updating. Positions shifting. Time folding in ways it shouldn't. Still, the display showed nothing. No shape. No outline. No presence. Just empty space. Like reality itself. Refused to render it. Run full classification. Elian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This was the step that always worked. Whatever the object was, the system would tell them. That was the point of the system. Sarah initiated the classification sequence. The ship's core processor engaged. Multiple databases opened simultaneously. Material registry. Threat library. Civilian registry. Military archive. Unknown anomaly index. 14,000 known material profiles. 600 recorded civilizations. Every documented object type in explored space. The system began processing. 0.1 seconds. 0.2. 0.3. It should have finished by now. Sarah frowned. Elian, I see it. Processing delay. That alone was wrong. The system didn't hesitate. It didn't think. It matched. Boys. 0.5 seconds. 0.8. 1.2 seconds. Now the bridge was completely still. Because everyone understood what this meant. The system wasn't failing. It was struggling. Result. One word appeared on the display. Unknown. No classification code. No probability range. No partial match. Unknown. Sarah stared at it. That's not right. Elian didn't respond. Because that word didn't mean what people thought it meant. Expand result, he said. Sarah opened the raw output. The underlying data appeared. She scanned it quickly. Then slowed. Then stopped. Sir. Elian stepped closer. What? This isn't a standard unknown. He looked at the screen. Normally, unknown meant no match found. Closest approximation listed. But here, there was nothing else. No approximation. No fallback. No attempt to categorize. Absence. What does the system log say? Elian asked. Sarah pulled it up. She read silently. Then again, slower. Elian, say it. Her voice dropped slightly. It didn't fail to identify it. The pause. It rejected identification. That landed harder. Elian's eyes narrowed. Explain. Sarah pointed to the log line. The system processed the data, then terminated classification. Why? Because the input did not fit within any valid classification structure. Elian read the line himself. Then again. Because the phrasing mattered. Not, no match found. But, cannot apply classification. That was different. Deeply different. The system wasn't saying, I don't know what this is. It was saying, this is not something that can be known. Elian felt that same cold recognition again. Stronger now. Run geometry scan. Sarah obeyed. The system mapped spatial structure. Normally, with height. Simple. Absolute. The scan completed instantly. Results appeared. Sarah blinked. Then leaned closer. Elian. He didn't ask. He just looked. The geometry field displayed. Values. But not stable ones. Dimensions fluctuating. 3D. 4D. Something else. The system tried to render it. Failed. Tried again. Failed differently. One of the fields displayed. Not zero. Not null. A question mark. The system didn't have a value. It didn't even have a number for the value. Elian stared at it. That's not possible. No, sir. Systems don't output question marks. I know. The pause. It means the calculation returned something outside numerical definition. Silence. Does that mean whatever shape this was did not fully exist in measurable space? Stabilize the model, Elian said. Sarah tried. The system attempted to lock onto a consistent geometry. It failed. Every time. Because the object, depending on how it was measured. Elian exhaled slowly. Material scan. Sarah initiated it. The sensor beam projected. Hit the object. Returned data. The system processed. Delay. Longer this time. Result. Unknown. Same word. But Sarah was already opening the raw data. She didn't wait. Elian, look at this. He stepped closer. The material profile was there. Precise. Readable. The system had the data. Refused to categorize it. Time stamps. Elian asked. Sarah checked. Processing time, 0.4 seconds. Elian nodded slowly. That's too long. Yes. That means the system tried. Yes. And failed. Sarah didn't answer. Because that wasn't accurate. It didn't fail, she said quietly. Elian looked at her. It stopped. The beat. As if continuing wasn't possible. The bridge went completely silent again. Not tense. Not reactive. So, because now they had crossed a line. Before, the object was strange. But their tools were useless. And tools were what made them safe. Elian straightened. Run threat assessment. Sarah hesitated. Just for a moment. Because that system was the last one. The one that mattered most. Do it, Elian said. She did. The threat analysis engine activated. Cross-referencing. Velocity. Composition. Behavior patterns. Historical data. Everything. The system processed. Faster this time. Almost immediate. Result appeared. Sarah read it. Then stopped. Elian. He didn't ask. He just watched her. Because her expression had changed. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Something else. Something quieter. It says. She hesitated. Then finished. Unable to complete. Elian frowned. Why? Sarah turned the screen. He read it. The reason was listed. Simple. Final. Threat assessment requires defined parameters. Input object does not meet criteria for parameterization. Elian stared at it. Then leaned back slightly. Because now, it was clear. Not what the object was, but what it meant. This situation had no framework, no protocol, no precedent, no category, nothing to stand on. He looked at the empty display again, at the place where something existed, that their entire system, their entire understanding, could not even begin to describe. And for the first time, no one on the bridge was waiting for an answer. Because there wasn't one. No one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because anything said now would feel insufficient. Commander Elian Rowe stood at the center console, hands resting lightly against its edge, eyes fixed on the empty display. The object, whatever it was, continued its approach. Distance updating. Position shifting. Time disagreeing with itself. Still, nothing visible. Time to intercept? He asked quietly. Navigation answered. 23 minutes at current vector. Elian nodded. Maintain distance. Yes, sir. No one suggested otherwise. Because no one wanted to get closer. Not yet. Open standard hail, Elian said. That broke the stillness. Sarah looked up. Sir, are we? Yes. The beat. We follow protocol until protocol fails. Sarah turned back to her console. Channel opened. 17 frequencies. Standard contact range. Her voice was steady, measured, professional. Unidentified vessel, this is Command Vessel Halcyon. You are entering restricted fringe space. Identify yourself and state your intent. The message transmitted. Left their ship. Crossed the distance. Something. The signal trace displayed clearly. Contact confirmed. No interference. No obstruction. No loss. The message arrived exactly where it was supposed to. And then, stuff. No echo. No reflection. No response. Not even noise. Sarah checked the trace again. Then again. It reached the target, she said. Elian nodded. And? It didn't come back. Meaning? She looked at the data. Carefully. As if the signal was absorbed. Silence. Because even empty space reflected something. Boys, but this was different. Send again, Elian said. She did. Same result. Clean transmission. Perfect delivery. Total absence of return. Like speaking into something that did not allow sound to exist. Elian's jaw tightened slightly. Switched to tight beam. Sarah adjusted the transmission. Narrow. Focused. Precise. Unidentified vessel, respond. The beam hit. Registered. Vanished. Nothing returned. Not delayed. Not distorted. Gone. Elian exhaled slowly. Stop transmissions. Sarah didn't argue. She was already stopping. because continuing felt wrong. Behind them, one of the junior officers shifted. Sir? Elian didn't turn. Yes. What if it can't respond? Elian considered that, then shook his head slightly. No. The pause. It chose not to. That landed. Because it implied awareness, intent, decision, and none of those had been confirmed. Until now. Elian returned his attention to the data. Distance, decreasing. Time, inconsistent. Reality, unstable. Update, he said. Sarah checked. Range now 3.1 million kilometers. Elian frowned. That's too fast. Velocity hasn't changed. Then why? He stopped. Because the answer was already there. It didn't move, he said quietly. Sarah nodded. No, sir. It just is closer now. No one spoke. Because they were starting to understand the pattern. Not movement. Not travel. Repositioning, like distance itself, was optional. A soft tone sounded from the console. Sarah froze. Elian. He looked. New data field. Something that hadn't been there before. Go ahead, he said. She opened it. A passive reading. Low level. Almost invisible. But present. Energy signature detected, she said. Elian leaned in. Source. The object. Type. She hesitated. Because the answer didn't help. Unknown. Of course. Magnitude. Minimal. That was worse. A mass that size should output. I know. He stopped. Because repeating rules was becoming meaningless. Is it a drive? He asked. Sarah scanned deeper. No. Weapons? No. Communication? No. Elian straightened. Then what is it doing? Sarah didn't answer immediately. Because the reading had a pattern. It's directional, she said slowly. Elian's eyes narrowed. Show me. She projected it. A faint vector line appeared. Not from them. Not toward them. But past them. Ahead. Into empty space. Elian stared at it. That's not our position. No. Is it avoiding us? Sarah checked. No. Then what is it targeting? She zoomed out. Expanded the field. Cross-referenced with star maps. Nothing. No planets. No stations. No debris. Empty coordinates. Elian, she said quietly. He didn't look away. What? It's not coming here. Silence. Explain. Sarah recalculated the vector. Adjusted for the anomaly. Reran trajectory. Her hand slowed. Then stopped. We were never the destination. Elian felt that cold recognition again. Deeper now. So what are we? Sarah didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. They were irrelevant. The object continued its approach. Closer now. Closer without moving. Closer without interacting. Closer without acknowledging. Like their presence did not matter. Elian stood very still. Because that realization was heavier than fear. This wasn't a threat. Not in the way they understood threats. It wasn't targeting them. It wasn't avoiding them. It wasn't responding to them. Simply did not include them. Time to nearest positional overlap? He asked. Navigation answered. 16 minutes. Elian nodded. Maintain observation. No one moved. No one spoke. The bridge settled into a different kind of silence. Not tense. Not reactive. But watchful. Like something had entered the room. And everyone understood. They were not part of the conversation. The object gained a name. Not because it introduced itself. But because the system found something it wasn't supposed to find. Marking detected, Sarah said. Elian didn't react immediately. Define. She zoomed in on the raw scan. Buried in the noise was a pattern. Not energy. Not structure. Something else. Surface anomaly, she said. Repeating formation, looks like. She hesitated. Because the word felt wrong. Language. That shifted everything. Elian stepped closer. Translate. Sarah routed the data through the linguistic database. The system processed. Fast this time. Too fast. Result appeared. She read it once. Then again. Sir. Elian looked at her. What does it say? Sarah didn't answer immediately, because saying it out loud would make it real. It's not a full translation, she said carefully. Partial match across multiple human dialect archives. Human. That word landed differently than anything else so far. Not unknown. Not alien. Not abstract. Human. Elian's expression didn't change. But the room shifted. Because humans were understood. Catalogued. Predictable. Dangerous. But within limits. Read it, he said. Sarah exhaled slowly. It translates to continuum error. Silence. The phrase hung in the air. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Elian frowned slightly. That's a designation? I don't know. Run deeper analysis. Sarah expanded the scan. The pattern resolved further. More markings. More structure. The system processed again. Another result. Clearer this time. She stared at it. Then spoke. There's a second translation. Elian waited. Because now. This mattered. It says. She paused, then corrected herself. No, it means. Another pause. Permanent contradiction. The bridge went still. Not gradually. All at once. Because that felt intentional. Not a label. Not a code. A statement. Elian looked back at the empty display. At the space where nothing existed. And something was named. Confirm source, he said. Sarah checked. It's on the object's surface. You're certain? Yes. That means it was put there. Yes. Elian nodded once. Then it's not a translation artifact. No. It's a declaration. No one disagreed. Because nothing about this felt accidental. Elian studied the name in silence. Permanent. Contradiction. 2 words. Simple. And completely aligned with everything they had seen. This is not a random anomaly, he said quietly. Sarah looked at him. No, sir. This is constructed. The beat. Designed. Another beat. Deliberately. The implications spread across the bridge. Faster than words. It was built. Then someone built it. If it was named, then someone understood it. And if someone understood it, then this wasn't beyond comprehension. Just beyond theirs. Cross-reference human registry, Elian said. Sarah complied. The system searched. Military archives. Civilian databases. Exploration logs. Every known human vessel. Process. Complete. Result. No match found. Sarah frowned. That's not possible. Elian didn't respond. Because now. That phrase meant nothing. Check restricted files. Already did. And? Nothing. Elian folded his arms slightly. Meaning this vessel doesn't officially exist. Silence. Because that meant something worse than unknown. Unregistered. Untracked. Unaccounted for. Run threat designation, Elian said. Sarah hesitated. Sir, we already run it again. With identity tag. She did. Input. Designation. Human vessel. Name. Permanent contradiction. The system processed. Result. Unable to complete. Of course. But this time, there was more. Sarah leaned forward. Elian. What? There's a subnote. Read it. She did. Voice quieter now. Object classification conflicts with foundational system assumptions. The pause. Threat parameters cannot be applied. Elian nodded slowly. That's new. Yes. It's learning. Sarah didn't respond. Because that thought was dangerous. Elian turned back to the main display. Still empty. Still perfect. Still hiding something that now had a name. Permanent contradiction, he repeated quietly. The words felt accurate. Too accurate. Like whoever named it knew exactly what it would be. Sir, Sarah said. Elian looked at her. There's more. Of course there was. There always is, he said. She brought up a new scan. Temporal resonance. Age estimation. Elian watched the data resolve. Freeze. Sarah blinked. No. Elian stepped closer. What? She pointed. The whole, it's reading. She stopped. Because saying it made no sense. Elian. Say it. 900 years. Silence. And the vessel? Sarah pulled the registry estimate. 42 years. Elian stared at the numbers. Side by side. Impossible. You're certain? Yes. That's not drift. No. Not air. No. The pause. Then explain it. Sarah shook her head. I can't. Of course she couldn't. Because both numbers were correct. Which meant both realities existed. Simultaneously. Elian looked back at the empty display. At the named object. At the thing that didn't exist. And had existed for centuries. And hadn't yet arrived. For the first time, he felt it clearly. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Something deeper. This wasn't an encounter. It wasn't even a first contact. It was an observation of something that had already been here, long before they noticed it. Maintain distance, he said quietly. No one questioned it. Because now, they understood one thing. Whatever this was, they were not ready for it. Contact in 8 minutes, navigation said. Elian nodded. Hold position. No one argued. No one suggested retreat. Because retreat implied threat. And this still didn't feel like one. Not directly. The object continued its approach. Distance collapsing without motion. Time disagreeing with itself. Reality bending. Quietly. A new signal. Unmistakable. Multiple contacts, Sarah said. Elian turned. Source. Outer fringe. High energy signatures. Large formation. How large? Then looked up. Fleet-sized. That changed things. Identify. Sarah routed the data. The system processed quickly this time. Because this made sense. Dominion strike fleet, she said. Elian's expression hardened slightly. How many? Estimated 120 vessels. Silence. Because now, there were rules again. Fleets had rules. War had rules. Physics had rules. Vector. Direct intercept course toward the object. Elian exhaled slowly. Of course. They had seen it too. Time to engagement? For minutes. Elian watched the display split. On one side, nothing. On the other, a full tactical formation. Structured. Predictable. Familiar. One obeyed reality. One did not. Open passive observation only, Elian said. Yes, sir. They watched. The Dominion fleet moved into formation with precision. Spacing perfect. Vectors aligned. Weapons charging. Everything exactly as it should be. Everything exactly as expected. For a moment, it felt normal again. Like the universe had corrected itself. Like order had returned. Target lock established, Sarah said. They're going to fire. Elian nodded. Yes. The pause. Let them. No one questioned that. Because now, they needed to see. The fleet completed its formation. A perfect arc. Surrounding nothing. Weapons reached full charge. Energy readings spiked across the board. This was power. Real power. Understandable power. Firing. The void lit up. Hundreds of weapons discharged simultaneously. Kinetic rounds. Plasma streams. Guided missiles. Quantum disruptors. Storm of force. Crossing space. Toward an object that did not exist. Elian watched. Focused. Still. Because this would answer everything. The weapons reached target range. Should have occurred. But instead, Sarah froze. Elian. He didn't look away. Report. Her voice dropped. Something's wrong. The first impacts registered. Not as collisions. Not as force. But as something else. Kinetic rounds. She hesitated. A reading as light. Elian's eyes narrowed. Clarify. They're not impacting. The pause. They're arriving as photons. Silence. Does that mean no mass, no force, no impact? But like the weapons had changed before they arrived. Plasma? Elian asked. Sarah checked. Her hand slowed, then stopped. They're not behaving as plasma. What are they doing? Another pause. They're stationary. Elian turned. In vacuum? Yes. That's not possible. I know. Explain. I can't. Of course. Because explanation required rules. And rules were gone. Missiles, Elian said. Sarah checked. Her expression changed. Subtly. But enough. Elian. What? They detonated. And? Not in physical space. Silence. Where? Sarah swallowed. The system says, probability space. Elian stared at her. That's not a location. I know. What does it mean? She shook her head. I don't know. Behind them, the tactical display flickered. Not violently. Not chaotically. Secondary effect detected, Sarah said. Report. The fleet. She hesitated. Their targeting systems are degrading. Elian frowned. How? Random errors. False coordinates. Incorrect solutions. The pause. As if the detonations became bad data. That landed. Because it meant the attack hadn't failed. Rewritten. Redirected. Elian turned back to the display. The storm of weapons continued. Thousands of impacts. None behaving correctly. None following rules. Being altered. And through all of it, the object did not respond. Did not move. Did not react. Simply existed. It turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Not evasive. Not defensive. Decisive. Elian felt it immediately. The shift. The moment when observation became something else. Sir, Sarah whispered. I see it. The object, the permanent contradiction, aligned itself with the fleet. Not hurried. Not aggressive. Certain. Like it had already decided. Elian's mind moved quickly. Too quickly. Because now, the question changed. Not, what is it? But, what will it do? The answer came. Immediately. Without warning. Without build-up. Without anything they could track. One ship. Vanished. No explosion. No debris. No energy spike. Another. Then 3 more. Elian stared at the display. Report. Sarah's voice was barely steady. They're not destroyed. Then what? They're just not there anymore. The system updated. Status field changed. Not destroyed. Not disabled. A new word appeared. Discontinued. Silence. Absolute. Because that word should not exist. Ships weren't discontinued. They were destroyed. Disabled. Removed. Another wave. More ships. No pattern. No warning. No defense. Absence. The fleet began to break. Not formation. Certainty. Because nothing they did mattered. Weapons continued firing. Systems recalibrating. Orders being issued. None of it changed anything. Elian watched. Because he couldn't look away. Because this was the answer. The object didn't fight. It didn't defend. It didn't counter. Simply redefined. What the attack was. What the ships were. What reality allowed. Another group vanished. Then another. Fleet collapsed. Not violently. Not dramatically. Quietly. Systematically. Till it stopped. 47 ships remained. The object. So, no follow-up. No pursuit. No completion. Stuff. Like it had reached a decision. And executed it fully. Elian stood very still. Because now, he understood something. Not everything. Not even close. But one thing, clearly, this was not a battle. It never had been. It was a demonstration. No one on the Halcyon spoke. Because language had started to fail. 47 Dominion ships remained. They held position, not advancing, not retreating, not firing, because there was nothing left to do. The permanent contradiction remained still, centered, unchanged, untouched, like nothing had happened. Elian watched the tactical display. Not the fleet. The empty spaces between them. The places where ships had been, and were not anymore. They didn't explode, he said quietly. No, Sarah replied. No debris. No. No energy release. No. Elian nodded slowly. Then they weren't destroyed. The pause. They were removed. Sarah didn't correct him, because that was the closest word they had. Scan residuals, he said. Sarah ran the analysis. The system searched for radiation, particle debris, gravitational echoes, energy displacement, anything, any trace. The result came back clean. Too clean. Nothing, she said. Elian frowned. That's not possible. I know. At that scale, there should be. I know. He stopped. Because again, the rules didn't apply. Run probability mapping. That got attention. Sarah looked up. Sir, that's theoretical. Run it. She did. The system hesitated. Not because it couldn't, but because it wasn't designed for this. It processed. A new field appeared. Not space. Not matter. Something else. A layered grid. Probability density mapping. Elian stepped closer. Focus on one of the lost ships. Sarah selected coordinates. The system analyzed. Displayed something faint. Very faint. Elian, she said quietly. I see it. In the grid was a trace. Not physical. Not detectable by normal means. But present. A ghost. Not of matter, but of possibility. It's still there, Elian said. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes. The pause. But not here. Elian's eyes narrowed. Explain. Sarah zoomed in. The trace shifted. Unstable. Unresolved. It exists, she said carefully, in a state that doesn't intersect with physical space. Silence. Does that mean the ships weren't gone? Not destroyed. Not erased. No longer part of reality they could access. Elian processed that. They've been displaced. Sarah shook her head. No. The pause. That would imply location. Another pause. This isn't displacement. Elian looked at her. Then what is it? She hesitated. Because this word was worse than all the others. Reclassification. That landed. Heavy. Final. Elian turned back to the display. To what? Sarah didn't answer immediately. Because the system. She pulled up the deeper scan. The classification field. Not empty this time. Not unknown. Something else. The system had forced a label. A placeholder. A compromise. Non-physical state. Elian stared at it. That's not a category. No. That's a failure. Yes. The pause. But it's the closest thing we have. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was understanding. Partial. Incomplete. But enough. Elian spoke slowly. Carefully. As if. He stopped. Reframed. The object isn't destroying targets. Sarah nodded. Yes. It's changing what they are. Yes. Another pause. Before impact. Yes. Elian exhaled. So that was it. Not defense. Not offense. Not interaction. Simply looked at something and decided it was something else. Kinetic round, light. Plasma, stationary waves. Missiles, corrupted data. Ships, non-physical states. Not damage. Not resistance. Transformation. Reality. Rewritten. Sir, Sarah said. Elian looked at her. There's a pattern. Show me. She overlaid the data. Before and after states. Side by side. Every transformation. Followed a logic. Not random. Not chaotic. Consistent. Deliberate. As if, she said quietly, it's selecting the lowest impact outcome. Elian frowned. Explain. The weapons weren't stopped, she said. They were converted into forms that couldn't cause harm. Data. All harmless. All irrelevant. And the ships? Elian asked. Sarah hesitated. They weren't destroyed, she said. They were removed from interaction. The pause. Like, taking them off the board. Elian stared at the display. 47 ships remained, spread across the formation. Not random. Not clustered. Please. Carefully. Why those? He asked. Sarah checked. Ran pattern analysis. They're spaced for return vectors. Elian's eyes narrowed. Return. Yes. The pause. They can all leave. Silence. Understanding. Slow. Heavy. Unavoidable. It chose them, Elian said. Yes. Before the engagement. Yes. Not based on resistance. No. Not based on threat. No. A final pause. Based on outcome. Sarah didn't respond. Because that was the only explanation left. Elian leaned back slightly, hands resting against the console. Because now, the scale of it was clear. This wasn't a weapon system. Weapons reacted. Weapons responded. Weapons followed rules. Even when they broke them. Was something else. It evaluated. It decided. And then, it made reality match that decision. Sir, Sarah said softly. Elian didn't look away. What? The object. It's not engaging anymore. He already knew. Because it had stopped. Exactly when it intended to. Of course it isn't, he said quietly. The pause. It's finished. Behind them, the remaining Dominion fleet. Held position. Silent. Unmoving. But because it had been allowed to be. Elian looked at the empty spaces again. At the ships that still existed. Just not here. And for the first time, the word came clearly. Not thought. Not avoided. Accepted. This wasn't a ship. Not really. It was a contradiction. Permanent. The first human response came 12 minutes later. Not a fleet. Not a weapon. A message. Simple. Direct. Undeniable. Incoming transmission, Sarah said. Elian didn't move immediately. Source. The object. Of course it was. Put it through. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the signal resolved. No distortion. No delay. No encryption. Clarity. A figure appeared on the central display. Human. Mid-60s. Still. Precise. Her presence filled the room in a way that had nothing to do with volume. She looked directly at them. Not scanning. Not observing. Looking. As if she already knew who they were. My name is Dr. Amara Vance, she said. Her voice was calm. Measured. Not diplomatic. Not defensive. Certain. I'm going to explain what you've just seen. No one interrupted. Because something in her tone made interruption irrelevant. What you are observing, she continued, is not a failure of your systems. Elian's jaw tightened slightly. That confirmed it. It is also not a violation of physics. That got attention. Because everything they had seen said otherwise. Dr. Vance continued. It is a violation of your model of physics. The pause. Subtle. Intentional. Those are not the same thing. Silence settled across the bridge. Because that felt true. Uncomfortable. But true. You believe, she said. That reality is fixed, and your role is to understand it. Another pause. Humans approached the problem differently. Elian spoke for the first time. Explain. She nodded slightly. As simply as I can. Behind her, faint structures shifted. Not visibly, but enough to feel. Like the space around her was layered. We discovered, she said, that reality is not a constant. The beat. It is a stable agreement. No one moved. Because that idea was dangerous. What you call physics, she continued, is the set of rules that consistently apply within a given probability resolution. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Despite herself. You're saying, she began, those rules can change? Dr. Vance shook her head gently. No. The pause. They can be reselected. That word landed. Harder than expected. The object you encountered, she said, does not break rules. Another pause. It chooses which rules apply. Elian stared at her. That's not possible. Dr. Vance didn't argue. She didn't need to. You've already seen it happen. Silence. Because they had. Weapons becoming light. Matter becoming nothing. Chips becoming something else. You're manipulating probability, Sarah said quietly. Dr. Vance nodded. That's the closest approximation your language allows. Elian stepped forward slightly. To what extent? Dr. Vance considered that. Then answered honestly. We don't know. That was unexpected. You built it, Elian said. Yes. Then you understand it. Another pause. No, she said. And that was worse. We understand what it does, she continued. We can reproduce the results. The beat. But the underlying framework. She shook her head slightly. Is still incomplete. Elian frowned. You're using technology you don't understand. Dr. Vance met his gaze. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Just truth. That's not safe, someone behind Elian said. Dr. Vance's expression didn't change. Safety, she said, is a function of predictability. The pause. This system is not predictable. Silence. Does that mean it wasn't controlled? Elian, Sarah whispered. He didn't respond. He was still focused. If you don't control it, he said, then what does? Dr. Vance took a breath. Not nervous. Measured. Intent, she said. That word was worse than all the others. Whose intent? Elian asked. Dr. Vance didn't answer immediately. Because this part mattered. The system evaluates outcomes, she said. Based on what? She held his gaze. Stability. The pause. Not advantage. Not victory. Not dominance. Another pause. Stability. Elian's mind moved quickly. The fleet. The survivors. The pattern. It chose who lived, he said. Yes. Before the engagement. Yes. Why? Dr. Vance answered without hesitation. Because that outcome produces the lowest long-term disruption across all known models. Silence. Heavy. Does that mean it wasn't reacting? It was deciding. Before anything happened. You're saying it predicts the future, Sarah said. Dr. Vance shook her head. No. The pause. It selects it. That changed everything. Elian felt it. The shift. The realization settling into place. This isn't a weapon, he said. No, Dr. Vance agreed. It's not. Then what is it? She answered simply. It's a system. The beat. A system that ensures reality resolves in a stable way. Elian stared at her. That's not your decision to make. Dr. Vance's expression didn't change. It isn't. Silence. Does that mean something else was making it? You don't control it, Elian said. No. You guide it. Yes. The pause. But only within limits. Elian looked back at the display. At the empty space. At the ships that were gone, but not gone. And if it decides something else? He asked. Dr. Vance's answer was immediate. It already has. Silence filled the bridge again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper. Recognition. They weren't observing a system. They weren't even observing a species. They were observing a different relationship with reality itself. Dr. Vance spoke again. One more thing. Elian looked at her. The vessel you encountered. The pause. It is not unique. That landed harder than anything else she had said. We have others, she continued. Less advanced. Less independent. Another pause. But developing. Elian felt something shift inside him. Slow. Heavy. Inevitable. How many? He asked. Dr. Vance shook her head slightly. That's not the question you should be asking. The pause. The question is. She looked directly at him. What happens when there are more? Silence. Complete. Absolute. Because now, this wasn't an incident. It wasn't even a warning. It was a direction. Dr. Vance's image flickered slightly. The encounter is concluded, she said. Maintain your position. Do not pursue. Elian didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say. The transmission ended. Cleanly. Completely. Like it had never been there. The display returned to empty. The object. Still present. Still unmoved. So, beyond them, the permanent contradiction moved. Not fast. Not slow. But its position shifted once. Then again. Then it was further than it should have been. Farther. No flash. No distortion. No measurable transition. One moment, it occupied space. Then it didn't. The readings collapsed to zero. Not baseline. Not absence. Zero. As if nothing had ever been there. Except the record of it. No one spoke. Because the silence now was different. It wasn't tension. It wasn't fear. It was the kind of quiet that comes when something irreversible has happened. Confirmed departure, Elian said. Sarah checked. Twice. Then again. Confirmed. The pause. No residual signature. Of course not, Elian said quietly, because that would have required rules. And rules were no longer guaranteed. He looked at the tactical display. 47 Dominion ships remained. Still in position. Still intact. Still alive. Because they had been allowed to be. Status of the fleet? He asked. Sarah ran the scan. Stable. No system failures? Minor disruptions. Nothing critical. Casualties? She hesitated. None reported. Elian nodded slowly. Of course. Because destruction had never been the goal. He turned away from the display. For the first time since this began. Because there was nothing left to observe. Only something to understand. Behind him, the crew began to move again. Quietly. Carefully. Like people relearning how to exist in a space that had changed. Log everything, Elian said. Sarah was already doing it. Every reading. Every inconsistency. Every impossible detail. Captured. Recorded. Contained. As much as something like this could be. But Elian already knew. The report wouldn't be enough. Because reports required categories. And this didn't fit into any. He stepped toward the viewport. Looked out into the dark. Empty. Still. Unchanged. As if nothing had happened. As if reality had simply corrected itself. Elian, Sarah said softly. He didn't turn. Yes. What do we call this? He considered that. Not the object. Not the event. But what it meant. A long moment passed. We don't, he said. The pause. Not yet. Because naming something meant understanding it. And they were nowhere close. Behind him, the systems continued logging. Trying to translate the untranslatable. Trying to describe something that had no language. Elian, Sarah said again. Different. Turned. She was looking at the data. At the pattern. At the surviving ships. At the ones that were left, she said. He followed her gaze. The formation. Broken. But not random. Never random. They were placed, she said quietly. Yes. Why? Elian didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't technical. It wasn't tactical. It was intentional. So they could leave, he said. The pause. So they could remember. Silence. Because that was worse than destruction. Destruction ended things. Continued them. Spread them. Changed them. Elian looked back out into the dark. At the place where the permanent contradiction had been. At the absence it left behind. And he understood something then. Not fully. But enough. This wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even a system. Not really. It was a direction. A way of interacting with reality. That didn't require understanding first. That didn't require permission. That didn't require agreement. Capability. Open external channel, he said. Sarah looked up. Sir? Dominion fleet. She hesitated. Then complied. Channel opened. Static. Then response. This is Dominion vessel clarity, a voice said. Tight. Controlled. But underneath. Something shaken. State your designation. Elian stepped forward. This is Command Vessel Halcyon. The pause. Report. Elian looked at the empty display. At the missing ships. At the data that didn't make sense. He spoke. Carefully. Deliberately. Choosing each word. Engagement concluded, he said. Another pause. No hostilities ongoing. A longer pause. What happened? The voice asked. Elian didn't answer immediately. Because there wasn't an answer that fit. Not a complete one. Not a correct one. So he gave the only one that mattered. You were allowed to leave, he said. Silence. Unsettled. Because that implied everything else. The channel remained open. But neither side spoke again. There was nothing left to say. Elian closed it. The bridge returned to quiet function. Systems stabilizing. Crew recovering. Reality reasserting itself. Or trying to. He stood there for a long time. Long after the data stopped changing. Long after the last system returned to normal. Because something fundamental had shifted. Not in space. Not in physics. But in understanding. They had always believed that knowledge came first. That you studied the universe, learned its rules, and then built within them. But this was something else. Something that built first. And let reality catch up. And if that was true, if even part of it was true, then the question wasn't, what was that ship? It was, what else had already been built? Behind him, Sarah spoke one last time. Quiet. Almost to herself. They said there would be more. Elian didn't turn. Yes. The pause. 5 new vessels under development. Silence. Because 5 was not a number. It was a beginning. And they'll be different, she said. Elian nodded slightly. Of course they will. Because if this one had become what it was, without full understanding, then the next ones would go further, in ways no one could predict. He looked out into the dark again. At the vastness. At the emptiness. At the place where something impossible had passed through. Without resistance. Without acknowledgement. Without needing to. For the first time in his career, Elian Rowe understood something simple. Unavoidable. They were not observing the edge of knowledge. They were behind it. And whatever came next would not wait for them to catch up.